Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO, John Michael, is reading a textbook, cover to cover, again. This textbook is from 1940, before we entered World War II, and this is an American history textbook from a Catholic school. So this book is from 1940, and we're nearing the end of it. So we're going to talk about the inventions that have brought us to the place and time of 1940. Transportation becomes key, Chapter 11, Our Nation at Work. Early railroads. Do you know the rate of speed that a train goes that passes nearest to your home? You have already learned about it in the first railroad, the Baltimore, Ohio Railroad. It began to carry passengers freight in 1830. The famous Tom Thumb engine on this railroad made the rate of 15 miles an hour. This was tough to be speedy in those days. The early railroads were crude compared with the railroad beds, engines, and cars used today. Improvements in railroads, times change. Shops were built where better and larger locomotives were made. It became no longer necessary to use horses on rainy days or on curved roads. The locomotive was now doing a full-time job of pulling passengers and freights and trains. Rails were improved. Steel rails took the place of the old wooden beams, which were covered with a strip of iron. Railroads were more carefully graded. More gravel was used in making the railroad better. Large coaches were built to replace the passenger cars. Men began to think of distance in hours of travel rather than miles. This was indeed progress. Government help. The story of the building of the first transcontinental railroad in 1869, told on page 403 a couple of days ago. The help given by the United States government made possible the building of the railroad spanning the continent. The United States government aided the railroad builders in many ways. One way, the government gave railroad companies land grants along the right of the way of the railroad. 2. The government allowed railroad companies to use timber and stone from government lands. 3. The government loaned large sums of money to encourage railroad building. Branches of railways pushed out to reach every place where passengers and freight might be carried to meet the main line. A network of railroads crisscrossed over the land in every direction. Today, there are over 240,000 miles of railroad in the United States. The map of the railroads of the United States shows the interesting facts. 1. Most of our railroads are east of the Mississippi River, north of the Ohio River. The northeastern part of our country is where most of our population lives. This is 1940. This is part of our country where most of the mills and factories are. Most of our railroads, too, have an east-west direction. 3. There were few railroads in the West. 4. Many railroads meet in Chicago. Here's a map of the railroads system in 1940 when this book was written. How railroads have helped our country. It is hard to realize the many ways in which railroads have helped our country. 1. Settlers moved into cheap land offered by government along the right of the way of the railroad. 2. Vast farms growing wheat and corn made possible cheaper grain and flour in the east. Cattle ranches increased because now there was a good way to send the cattle into market. Cheaper meat was the result. 4. Small towns came into being along the railroad. These became important trading centers for the farm communities. Mines and forests. 5. Mines and forests opened up now that there was a better way to getting ore and timber to market. 6. Mills and factories in the east became more prosperous because they were now able to buy the raw materials they needed. They had a market in the West for the articles they made. Best of all, the railroad helped to more closely unite the parts of a country. For many years, railroads did not have to worry about completion. Railroads almost put canals out of business. Then came the use of the automobile and the building of good railroads. The automobile and the auto bus began to cut heavily into the passenger business. Auto trucks began to haul large quantities of freight. Railroads felt a decline in business. Railroads could not afford to let the automobile, the auto bus, and the auto trucks take all their business. The railroads had to improve in order to attract business. Better railroads, steam-lined trains, electric engines, and better rates have all helped the railroads to recover some of their business. The automobile and auto bus and the auto truck are the greatest rivals of the railroad. It's kind of interesting that since 1940, Americans have kind of lost focus on the railroad. Our railway system, apparently there's some beautiful scenics that you can see in them still, but it's just not as expansive as it could be, which is a bit of a shame. Wouldn't it be nice to travel by rail? I think it probably would be. The horseless age. The horse in American history. The Spaniards first brought a horse to America. Since that time, the patient animal has played a very important role in our history. The horse was a good friend to the early settlers. He pulled the plows over the fields, he hauled the crops, and carried his owner from place to place. He served as the patriots throughout the Revolution. Later, the Pony Express carried mail to the distant part of the country. The horse served in the both blue and gray in the Civil War. After the war, horse took a great part in carrying business on of the country. All of the trucking and hauling of the cities was done by horse. On the farms, large and small, horse plowed, reaped, and hauled. The time was coming when machines would take the place of the horse. The first automobiles. The first automobiles were so queer-looking that few people believed that such a machine could ever take the place of a horse. The machines were clumsy, and they ran so badly that boys used to run after them, shouting, "Get a horse!" This was good advice because when the automobiles broke down, it was as they very often did, a horse had to pull it home. The first problem in building an automobile was to get the engine that would be small but powerful. It was not until after 1890 that the first modern automobiles was built. One inventor, Ransom E. Olds, invented a three-wheeled carriage with an engine to make it move. Charles Duryea built an automobile with four wheels. Henry Ford, another inventor, built a somewhat better machine in 1893. The gasoline engine was the principal thing that made the automobile successful. The manufacturing of automobiles and auto trucks is now one of our greatest industries. This is largely due to the improvements that have been made in motors, tires, brakes, and indeed in all parts of the auto. Clumsy-looking machines. That's early ones. Get a horse. Quantity production. And we're going to actually cut it after this section here. And we'll finish up the rest of this tomorrow. The early automobiles were very expensive. Low-priced cars was much to be desired. Low-priced cars were finally made possible through quantity production. That means making a great many cars and selling each car for small profit. Henry Ford deserves much credit for planning how to price cars. "I will build a car for the multitude," said Henry Ford. And let that ring in your ear. Have a good day, and God bless. John Michael, Context is Everything Media Network. If you made it this far, please subscribe.